Now, coming to the chapter, capital allowances. This chapter actually for individuals as well as for companies, it is something that is the students actually are expected to have a very good understanding on. So before we go into any explanations, what all aspects are there in this chapter? What all things are you expected to know? I'll tell you the various concept and capital allowance you're expected to know. So capital allowance, yeah, capital allowance. So various concepts you're supposed to know is first of all about the main pool, then about the special pool, then about AIA, yeah, and then also you need to know about motor cars, a special treatment when it comes to motor cars, and then when there's an asset with private use, okay, asset with private use, then what is like when trade ceases, when the trade ceases, what happens, yeah, then we should know what is the meaning of balancing charge, balancing charge, yeah, balancing charge. Then we also need to know, okay, short or long accounting period, what is the effect, short or long accounting period, long accounting period, what is the effect on the capital allowance calculation. Then there is a newer concept called SBA, we will look at that. Then we will also look at small pool, yeah, and also there is something known as the short life asset, okay, the short life asset, all right, short life asset. Okay, these are the various concepts that we are actually going to look at in this particular area. Now, going into the main steps. Now, think about the format. How do you do the calculation? First, you're at TWDB, then you find out how many pools you require, then additions qualifying for AI, then additions not qualifying for AI, and then you do the WDA, and then you get the answer. So the allowances column. So the total of the allowances column is what we require as our answer. So all the additions we add, all the disposals we reduce. This is the basic way to do it. Now, AIA amount for 12 months. What is the AIA amount for 12 months? You have your AIA amount as pound 1 million is pound 1 million. That is your AIA amount for 12 months. Then an item not qualifying for AIA is your motor car. Remember, it says motor car. Van is actually qualifying. By default, all capital expenditure goes to which pool? It is the main pool. Then let's take a look at all these things. Cars with CO2 emission 51 to 110 gram per kilometer. Which pool does it go to? It goes to the main pool. Less than or equal to 50 gram per kilometer new car, which there's something called as the FY. What is FY? 100% FY means that you can write off the entire amount of, you can actually write off the entire amount and put it in the allowances column. Less than or equal to 50 gram per kilometer, and it is second hand car. If it is a second hand car, it goes to the main pool. Then greater than 110 gram per kilometer, it goes to the special pool. Yeah, now let's talk about special pool in a while. That is, what kind of assets go to special pool. So when it comes to special pool, yeah, so some of the assets that qualify that go to special pool are, yeah, so there is the long life assets. Yeah, long life assets means 25 years working life and 100,000 cost, prorated for shorter or longer periods. And cars with CO2 emission, greater than 110 gram per kilometer, right? Then also there is the integral features of building, integral features of a building, integral features of a building. Now, when we say integral features of a building, what all does that include? What all features include integral features of a building? So these are the integral features of a building. Yeah, the integral features of a building. These are the different integral features. Just go through them. That is a expenditure on any of these items. You are actually putting them under special pool. And remember, in special pool, the WDA, what is it? Is it 18%? No, it is 6%. Yes, it is 6% instead of 18%. And AIA, when it comes to AIA, you'll always give preference to special pool items because the allowance we get for special pool is smaller than what we get for WDA. So that's all about special pool. Now, speaking about main pool, remember by default, all the assets go to the main pool, disposal or purchase. Disposal, remember, it's a lower of the disposal value and the cost. We discussed special pool and AIA, the amount is 1 million and 1 million gets split into smaller amounts if it is longer or shorter periods. Don't forget that. Then motor cars do not qualify for AIA. I've already mentioned the different types of motor cars. Now, assets with private use. What do you do when there is assets with private use? You make a separate column itself called assets with private use. And what do? You do everything normally, except for when you take the WDA to the allowances column, you only take the business proportion of it to the allowances column. That is for assets with private use. Now, when it comes to ceasing trade, there is no AIA, no WDA, no FY. So everything you have to do is add all the purchase minus all the disposals. We have to basically get a zero balance. Okay, we have to get a zero balance. So after all the purchases and disposals and everything, if we have a positive balance, we minus it. When we minus it as a balancing allowance. Okay. Now let's say after all the purchase and disposals, it is a negative balance. If it is a negative balance, we call it a balancing charge. If at all you get a negative balance, it is called a balancing charge. You don't do WDA. I'm not talking about ceasing, but if you get a negative balance, you never do WDA. As it is, you take it to the allowances column, and the allowance column, you're going to minus it. You're not going to add it to the allowance column. Okay. Then when it comes to short or long accounting periods, when it comes to short accounting periods, you time apportion the WDA and the AIA. Don't forget that. Then there is the small pool. Now, before going to SPA, small pool. What is small pool? Now, after doing, just before WDA, the balance just before WDA, if it is less than 1,000, then the entire amount we take it to the allowance column. We don't do a WD at that point. Then what exactly is short life asset? Let's discuss about short life assets. Now, short life asset is basically normal assets, but short life asset is actually these assets which are actually having a life. They have a life of lesser than 8 years. So they are put in a special pool called short life asset, and they are treated in the same way. Any purchase, disposals, exactly the same thing. Now, if they are not sold within 8 years of the end of the accounting period in which it was bought, okay, let's say it was bought in the year ended 31st March 2018. Yeah, 2018. So within 8 years, as in within 31st March 2018 plus 8, year 26. So within that many years, if it is not sold, then we take it back to the main pool. We transfer it back to the main pool. If at all short life asset is sold, then we do the usual treatment. That entire pool is over. When we're actually closing off an entire pool, we write it off without WDA. Okay. Now there is one question which you need to try. Question number 61 called Olive, to understand this point. About I told, right, when you're closing off a pool, you have to write the entire thing off. Now let's talk about SBA. Now, SBA, it's something new which is introduced as per the Finance Act 2020 and is applicable for ACCA exams from June 2021 sitting onwards. So be careful with this. It could be tested because new areas are very frequently tested. So SBA is actually a special allowance you're getting for certain structures and buildings. You can see that for certain structures and buildings. Yeah, structures and buildings. Now the allowance is 3% over a 33 1/3 period. 33 1/3 period. From the time we bought it, 33 1/3 period. On what kind of assets do we get SBA? Let's take a look. On new non-residential structures and buildings, basically buildings like your offices, retail and wholesale premises, factories and warehouses, walls, bridges, tunnels, and the cost of subsequent improvements. So any kind of building which you're having for your business, you're getting an allowance for that. Now, earlier it was not available because the buildings were not considered as plant and machinery. Yeah. So some things to keep in mind on what kind of things do we get SBA. Now, remember, it is for newly constructed buildings and not for purchased buildings. If at all SBA is available for purchased buildings, they'll mention to you. So it is not available unless stated otherwise. And also it is important that the expenditure must have incurred after 29/10/18. But for your exams, it's always after 6/4/2020. So that's okay. Then the following costs, they do not actually be a part of qualifying cost. Land, legal fees, repairs, cost of planning, permission fees, and stamp taxes and maintenance. They are not a part of qualifying cost. Okay. And there is no pooling system, as in you're not putting this building in main pool, special pool, no, nothing like that. It's completely separate from the main format we studied. Okay. And there is no AIA for that. And also remember, we need to do time apportioning for SBA. For SBA, there is something called as a time apportioning. And what is the effect on the seller and the buyer? When a person who is having a building is selling, what is the effect of the SBA? We can add the SBA to the proceeds. Adding the SBA claim to the seller's disposal proceeds. What is the effect on the buyer? It will continue. We know that SBA is available for 33 1/3 period. So let's say a person uses asset for 3 years and is selling it. So the other person, the buyer, will actually have SBA on it for 30 1/3 years more. Okay. So that is the effect on the seller and the buyer. So be very careful with SBA. If you want to have a look and go through the questions we did in our handouts, the last few questions, because it's a new topic. And just to show you, this is what the capital allowance working looks like. Capital allowance is a very important chapter from the individual's point of view as well as from the company's point of view. So go through all these points which I have mentioned. Once again, I'll show you those points. These points which I mentioned, ensure that you know each of these.